This video is going to contain spoilers from the off. Wow, what an ending to an episode that was. Rook's Rest, a place nobody thought worthy of taking, ended up being the destination for the falling of the second dragon in this war that's going to be far more deadly than anybody could have ever imagined. The Queen Who Never Was and Rhaenys met their end. We had a whole Scar and Mufasa arc going on with Aegon and Aemond. And with Criston Cole seeing the ashes and bones instead of blood and flesh was something which gave him a completely new perspective. So with that, let's jump into the episode and discuss all that there was to take away from it. Here is House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 4, Ending Explained. The Final Battle. The final 15 minutes of this episode really did steal it. Not only did we see an epic battle in many senses of the word, but we saw Vhagar, Rhaenys and Sunfire up in the air, as well as betrayal, treason, and the realization that this war was going to be a completely different type of war. Aegon didn't want to be made a fool of, and ever since he ascended the Iron Throne, he himself hadn't really felt worthy of being sat there. He doesn't know how to rule, he acts on his emotions, and he has no tactical knowledge on what to do in warfare. Aemond is the brother that seems to be more equipped and deserving of sitting on the Iron Throne. At the end of the previous episode, we saw that Aegon humiliated Aemond, and this felt like Aemond's way of getting revenge on his brother, but in a more definitive way. Aemond knows that Aegon isn't fit to be king, and when they were speaking in High Valyrian to one another in front of the council, he spared his brother the embarrassment there. Aegon didn't want to be made a fool of and felt he wasn't being informed of certain things, hence why he ended up taking things into his own hands and flying into battle, going against the plan Sir Criston Kingmaker Cole and Aemond had devised, and also going against his mother's words in telling him to do nothing. On the battlefield, as soon as Aemond noticed his brother on Sunfire, he even called him an idiot there, showing his true feelings, and I genuinely feel he wanted Aegon to be killed. With Sunfire and Aegon both dropping to the ground after Aemond commanded Dracarys from Vhagar. One could even argue that before Sir Criston Cole ended up arriving there, Aemond may have even gone on to have killed his brother where he laid, but he was obviously interrupted. With Aemond holding onto the Valyrian steel blade as well, the very blade that the king wields, it showed us that like what's almost happening with Daemon and Rhaenyra and the divide that's forming between them, it's happening with Aegon and Aemond. Do I think the king is dead? I don't think so. It would be a bold move killing off the king this early in the show, but I think this will almost be a lesson learned for Aegon. However, he saw what his brother did, and I think that will change the dynamic between them moving forward. One thing that went under the radar a bit in this episode was the state that King's Landing's in. We heard that the supplies were running low, there wasn't much coin left, and people were growing restless. It very much feels like Aegon is king, but king of what? His people are struggling and there's nothing he can do about it at the moment due to the blockade that's in place, so that's only going to get worse. Within the novel, this whole scene actually played out completely differently, as it was said that all three of the dragons hit the ground at the same time during the battle, and there was no sign of Aemond actually looking to kill his brother by commanding Dracarys. So it seems like the show has added this extra layer into the story to make it more complex and almost mirror the Blacks a little bit more, showing that they may be more similar than realized. Rhaenys Death. The Queen Who Never Was met her end in this episode of the show, and it was actually quite an emotional moment. She asked Rhaenyra to send her to Rook's Rest so that she could be the person that faced off against Sir Criston Cole, and there was a specific reason for that. When we go back to episode 9 of season 1, she had the opportunity to end things on the spot, but she chose not to, and in this instance, she was essentially involved in the opening of the war. There was a sense of sadness throughout Rhaenys in this episode of the show, and it very much felt like she was losing grasp on not only reality, but all aspects of her life. She believed both of her children were dead, her grandchild was sent away, she was drifting further away from her husband Corlys, and I think she just felt like she was done with it all, hence why she suggested to Rhaenyra that she would be the person to go. I think she knew that there was a strong chance that she might not have made it back after embarking, but I don't think she cared. As Vhagar killed Rhaenys and as she was dropping to the ground, there was almost like a peaceful look in her eye, one which showed that she was finally at peace, knowing that the end was approaching her. There was a point during the battle where she survived the fight with Vhagar and Sunfire, but then she went and turned back around towards Vhagar and wanted to finish the fight, rather than fleeing and saving herself in that moment, showing just how committed to the cause she was. She knew that the war was already at a point where it had drifted far from its original cause, and I feel she knew that she had to be the person to start this war because she almost knew the most effective way to do it. Jace wanted to go in there on a dragon and just burn everybody to the ground, and can you imagine that? Both Aemond, Aegon and Jace just letting loose. It would have been even more chaotic than what we saw. whereas Rhaenys took a very different approach to that. It showed the difference in maturity levels between the several generations below her and her generation. She didn't want the bloodshed to be large and unnecessary, but only what was needed. Her death was a beautifully sad moment in the episode, and one that really stayed true to the character. Alicent. So Alicent was pregnant with Criston Cole's baby then, and Larys Strong saw her take the drink to get rid of it. Although Alicent didn't have a large role in this episode, her involvement was something which was crucial to the development. I think she's made it kind of clear that she understands that Viserys probably didn't want Aegon to be king. She asked the Grand Maester, she spoke with Larys, and she even started patronizing Aegon. I don't think she even believes that he's worthy of being king, hence why she was looking for Viserys' books in Aegon's chamber, turning to history to make decisions in the present and for the future. I imagine she was most probably also looking for something which might have mentioned A Song of Ice and Fire. The fact that Aegon didn't have any of the books there was something which I felt was kind of symbolic to the type of ruler that he was. He wasn't looking at the past and how things were done, trying to retain the elongated peace that was in place. Instead, he was trying to do things himself, without experience, without the guidance of the council, and without looking at what came before. So I think Alicent is eventually going to grow tired of her son, as it seems she already has. Her relationship with Sir Criston Cole went to another level with her being with baby, and I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen between them and if it will be revealed at any point. Larys is a sponge and retains information, so if squeezed, a leak might start. Sir Criston Cole is hand to the king, and I can't imagine Aegon being pleased about that in the slightest. Daemon. Daemon has a desire for power, and he's mourning the fact that he never had the opportunity to sit on the Iron Throne, seeing as though his brother skipped his succession and went straight to Rhaenyra. In the previous episode, we saw that he wanted to be referred to as Your Grace, even though it wasn't customary for him to be called that, as it was Rhaenyra who was the queen. Plus, he's gone and taken Harrenhal and is just residing there without informing anybody at Dragonstone. He's kinda just acting like a kid that's thrown his toys out the pram and has gone off and started sulking. During this episode, we saw that he had multiple visions, and there was a lot of importance to them. He started by seeing a young Rhaenyra in the Red Keep, and he couldn't understand her. She was sat on the Iron Throne, and as she started walking towards him, you could see that he was growing unsettled, so much so that he executed her. And with that, there was an important shot of the crown that was rattling on the floor, almost symbolizing the two different things that were in his mind. Rhaenyra, somebody who he himself loved and wanted to be queen at one point, and on the other side, the crown that he so desires and the throne that he wants to sit upon. So it showed that conflict that was present in his mind. The second vision that he had was of somebody that looked like Aemond, and when they turned around, it was actually himself, but with Aemond's eye patch on. This is important because the both of them were essentially mirrored versions of one another. They both committed horrific acts, such as Lucerys being killed, and also Jaehaerys. They're both the younger brother to the king, and they both desire power that they simply can't have. So Daemon was essentially seeing himself in Aemond and drawing the similarities between the both of them. The final vision that he had was when he saw the housemaid in the form of Laena, his wife, who died in season 1 of the show. This felt like something which was there to show us another thing that he'd lost throughout his life. Alice Rivers and Daemon met properly in this episode of the show, and she mentioned about the curse of Harrenhal, so I feel it's potentially making us question whether or not that's what's interfering with Daemon's mind, or if it's the drink that she gave him, or if he's just having some kind of breakdown. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. I like the fact that this was an episode that really allowed us to see inside the mind of many of the characters. Whether that be Alicent and her now knowing that Viserys probably didn't want Aegon to be king, Aegon and his disappointment in himself and the fact that he felt like he wasn't doing a good job, Aemond and the hatred for his brother, Sir Criston Cole and him becoming more emboldened, Rhaenys and the emptiness that was inside of her, Larys Strong and the sponge-like behaviour that he had, and Daemon struggling with his jealousy of Rhaenyra and the position that she's in being queen. Even though the episode was only 50 minutes, it felt like so much happened, and we got dedicated time with each and every character. We learned a lot, and I think everything that happened with Aegon and Daemon is going to be crucial. The final battle from a visual perspective was just incredible to watch. This was the first proper dragon fight that we've had this season, and it felt so large scale. When Vhagar entered the scene, you just knew that the level was going to elevate, and it did exactly that. The performances in this show really are outstanding, but for me, in this episode, Aemond, Aegon and Rhaenys stole it. By taking a look inside of their minds, we got to see more of the characters and the real human side that they have. They had struggles that many of us can have: emptiness, loneliness, feeling worthless, and jealousy. So by seeing those, there was a sense of empathy with a lot of them. Every episode, Sir Criston Cole is just getting better and better. He's morphing into an evil individual, and I think his ego is going to eventually get the better of him. The shot of him walking off after killing Lord Darkling was a really powerful one, and the framing of it with him walking along and everybody bending the knee was great on the eye. I don't know if I feel like this season is as good as season 1 right now, but there's still time for that to change. The ending of this episode is definitely up there with all-time moments in the show, and the first battle of the war has now been carried out amongst dragons, so I imagine things are only going to get a lot darker. So, there you have it. House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 4 Ending Explained.